Imagine this, a state spending billions of dollars to build tanks, only to pull them back from the battlefield. Why? Because the moment they're sent in, drones blow them up from the air. What's happening to Russia isn't just a military defeat, it's a catastrophe that could end with the complete collapse of an empire. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how one country, using technology and strategy, completely dismantled the armored might of one of the world's most powerful armies, Russia. There's a strange atmosphere on the Kharkiv front right now. For months, Ukrainian reconnaissance teams and drone operators have been watching Russian positions with eagle eyes. But what are they seeing? No Russian tanks at all. Completely empty fields. What does this mean? Simple, Russia got scared. Putin and his generals realized that the moment they bring tanks to the front lines, drones destroy them from the air. After suffering massive losses, they finally understood that this tactic no longer works. So what did they do? They pulled the tanks far, far back, behind the border, as far as cargo planes can reach. But here's the funny part. According to intelligence reports coming from Ukraine's 13th Brigade, even though Russia is gathering these tanks in supposedly safe rear areas kilometers from the border, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones are still finding them and sending missiles their way. The rear areas have now become just as dangerous as the front lines. Think about it, sending tanks to a place where they can't be used effectively is actually worse than not sending them at all. You pay the full cost either way, but gain zero strategic advantage. Ukraine's UAVs now know the location of every depot Russia is using as storage. By March 5, 2026, Russia had lost approximately 11,727 tanks in the war against Ukraine. Yes, 11,727. Let me write it out in words, 11,727 tanks. To help you grasp just how enormous that number is, consider this. It means Russia is losing an average of 2,900 tanks per year. At this rate, the very foundation of Russia's strategic armored power has been completely obliterated. A single main battle tank costs roughly $3 to $4 million on average. Let's do the quick math. 11,727 times $3.5 million equals $41 billion, just for the tanks alone. Now add in cargo vehicles, helicopters, artillery systems, and countless other pieces of equipment. But go deeper. These tanks aren't just money. Each one is a high-tech product containing specialized technology, proprietary components, and advanced communication systems. Due to Western sanctions, Russia can no longer produce these chips and critical subsystems. Rebuilding this capability is borderline impossible. Even more devastating is the human cost. A trained tank crew takes 18 months to prepare. A tank itself takes about 8 months to manufacture in the factory. So every lost tank doesn't just mean the loss of the machine, it also means the permanent loss of an experienced crew that cannot easily be replaced. Russia is bleeding not only hardware but also irreplaceable human expertise and institutional knowledge. This is no longer just a war of attrition, it's the systematic dismantling of an empire's armored backbone. Let's get real about Russia's modern tank production. The Kremlin tells its news anchors that they're producing 400 T-90M tanks per year. 400. When Ukrainian commanders heard that number, they burst out laughing. Why? Because Ukraine is destroying Russian tanks at a rate of 2,900 per year. 2,900 versus 400. Mathematically, Russia is losing a net 2,500 tanks every single year. They're losing 7 times more tanks than they can produce. If you want a sports analogy, it's like playing football and losing 7-0 every single season. No team, no economy, no military can sustain that. And even that production figure is highly questionable. Russia's factories are outdated and have never been properly modernized. On top of that, they're now taking direct hits from airstrikes. ATACMS missiles and other precision weapons are regularly slamming into Russian production facilities. Ukraine has already crippled Russia's manufacturing capacity to a point where even the claimed 400 tanks per year is starting to look like propaganda. In short, Russia isn't replenishing its armored forces, it's bleeding them dry faster than it can ever hope to replace them. This isn't just a war of attrition anymore. It's the slow, systematic collapse of one of the world's largest tank armies, and the numbers don't lie. So what did Russia do when they saw this picture? They made a major strategic shift. Tanks are dying, so they said, let's try sending humans instead. In the Kharkiv region, Russian commanders are now pushing small infantry groups, teams of 5 to 10 men, directly into Ukrainian lines with no logistical support. This isn't theater, it's real. These are poorly trained, unmotivated, often forcibly conscripted soldiers. The catch? The people sending them know full well that these men are not coming back. Ukrainian drone operators spot this immediately. A Russian infantry squad is detected moving, a drone is vectored in, and 30 seconds later that group no longer exists. No drama, no noise, people are simply erased from the air in complete silence. What are the weekly figures in Kharkiv? Russia is losing an average of 1,000 to 2,000 soldiers per week. Can they sustain this for long? No. Because this is pure consumption. There is no gain, only bodies piling up. And this is where Putin's choice becomes truly chilling. Instead of sending tanks, he is sending people. Why? Perhaps because tanks are seen as more valuable for spare parts. Perhaps for Putin this war is no longer just military, it's ideological. Or maybe he simply doesn't grasp the true state of his own army anymore. Either way, the math is merciless. Russia is trading irreplaceable human lives for temporary battlefield optics, while Ukraine's drones continue to turn every exposed movement into a death sentence. This isn't strategy, it's desperation dressed up as tactics. And the human cost is mounting faster than any propaganda can hide. Let's put a number on it. According to Ukrainian intelligence, 1 in every 25 Russian men aged 18 to 49 is either dead or permanently disabled in the war in Ukraine. This is not just a military statistic, this is a demographic catastrophe for an entire nation. This is Russia's future being erased. Russia's population was already in decline. Now a massive portion of its working-age male population is either dead or crippled for life. Factories, construction sites, farms. Entire sectors are being stripped of manpower. Russia is facing a full-blown human resource crisis. To compensate for these losses, Russia is increasingly sending very young boys, much older men, and even prisoners into the meat grinder. Quality soldiering has been replaced by the desperate logic of sheer numbers. This isn't sustainable warfare anymore. It's national suicide by attrition. Every tank lost can eventually be replaced, at enormous cost. Every young man lost forever cannot. Russia is bleeding its demographic future on the battlefields of Ukraine, and the numbers are too horrific to ignore. Russia's last hope, fiber optic drones. What are they? Drones that are immune to electronic warfare, jamming, because they are controlled via a physical cable, no radio signals, no GPS. Just an optical fiber trailing behind them. This makes Ukraine's electronic warfare defenses completely ineffective against them. At the command level, this looks clever. Russia has started using these drones much more frequently. Their range has been extended. They can now penetrate deep into Ukrainian lines. This is the new threat. Ukraine's air defense now has to open yet another front. But here's where we see Russia's trap. These are still purely destructive weapons. They cannot capture territory. To hold ground you need tanks. You need infantry. You need persistent presence. And that's exactly the problem. Russia's tanks are gone. So these fiber optic drones only create frustration, they deliver no strategic gain. Wars are not won this way. You cannot end a war without seizing and holding territory. Drones that can't occupy land are, at best. A very expensive way to delay the inevitable. Russia is buying time, not victory. When the war began, Russia held a clear advantage in drone technology over Ukraine. Orion, for post-loitering munitions. These were solid systems. But over time, a major problem emerged. Ukraine's electronic warfare systems started disrupting them. What is electronic warfare? Simply put, it's the technology used to jam, spoof, or interfere with an enemy's radio signals. Ukraine began cutting the GPS signals of Russian drones, rendering them uncontrollable. Russian ground control would send commands to the drone, but with the signal jammed, the drone was either left flying on its own or simply crashed. This drove Russian commanders insane. Multi-million-dollar assets would take off, only to be neutralized 15 minutes later by Ukraine's jamming systems. Efficiency plummeted. Loss rates skyrocketed. At that point, Russian military engineers sat down at the drawing board and asked one critical question: what if we went back to old-school technology? Fiber optic cable technology is not new. In fact, it has been known since the 1970s. Military forces were well aware of it too. Telephone lines used fiber optics. Cable TV relied on fiber optic cables. So why didn't this technology emerge earlier in military applications? The simple reason: it was heavy, cumbersome, and slow. Imagine attaching a 50-meter cable to a drone. The cable has to fly along with it, creating instability, aerodynamic problems, and drag. And speed? It couldn't compete with the near-instantaneous transmission of radio signals. But electronic warfare changed the equation completely. For Russia, the choice became clear: fast drones that get destroyed, or slower drones that survive? The answer: surviving drones. Russia began developing fiber optic tethered drones. The concept is straightforward: a command center inside an aircraft, or ground vehicle, deploys a drone connected by a thin fiber optic cable. The drone pilot sends commands and receives video feed through this optical cable. The key advantage? No radio signal. Ukraine's jamming systems cannot disrupt it. Because a cable is a physical link, not a signal that can be jammed or spoofed. This makes the drones effectively immune to electronic warfare. No more lost connections, no more spoofed GPS, no more forced crashes from interference. In environments saturated with jamming, which the Ukraine war has become, this is a game changer. However, there are still major limitations. Range is restricted by the length and weight of the cable spool, though Russia has reportedly extended it to 20 to 60 kilometers in some configurations with repeater drones. The drone is tethered. It cannot fly freely or evade by cutting the line, though cutting the cable is now one of the few ways to defeat it. They remain destructive tools only, excellent for kamikaze strikes or reconnaissance, but useless for holding or capturing territory. Bottom line. Fiber optic drones solve the jamming problem and allow deeper, more reliable strikes, but they don't win wars on their own. Wars are still won by controlling ground, not just destroying from afar. Russia is buying tactical advantages and time, but without tanks, infantry, and sustained presence, these drones remain a very expensive, and ultimately limited, frustration tool rather than a decisive strategic shift. And here's the truth. Russia was forced to bury its multi-million-dollar tanks because Ukraine seized control of the skies. Now their last hope rests on fiber-optic tethered drones. Immune to jamming, flying without radio signals, these old new weapons. Yes, they might strike a few more targets. They might disrupt a few more fronts. But never forget, no matter how smart a drone is, it cannot capture and hold ground. To win a war, you don't control the sky, you control the earth. Without tanks, without infantry, without persistent presence, fiber-optic drones are nothing more than a more expensive explosion of rage. All Russia has left is this, anger and the desperate attempt to buy time. But time is running out too. The winner of this war is still unknown. But the loser is already clear, the young men dying every day, the futures being destroyed, and the dreams collapsing. If you don't want to miss these kinds of deep analyses, cold hard facts, and the big picture, turn on notifications, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think Russia can escape this dead end? Or can it even? See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. The truth can be dark, but knowing it remains our greatest power. Goodbye.